Welcome to the Innovate Europe podcast, where we talk to the founders and funders and all those who are making Europe great again or shaping the European innovation system. I'm Clark Parsons, your host. I'm the managing director of the Innovate Europe Foundation, and that's really relevant because I'm joined here today by Jonas Andrulis, who's the founder and CEO of Aleph Alpha, but also the chairperson of the Innovate Europe Foundation, which is quite an honor to have you with us. So welcome, Jonas. Really exciting to have you talking today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Really fired up. You founded Aleph Alpha in Heidelberg in 2019, but before that, you were a senior AI research and development engineer at Apple in Silicon Valley. And before that, you founded Palace Ludens GmbH, which focused on machine learning and computer vision. So I dare say we could call you one of the original gangsters, one of the real forerunners of machine learning and AI around the world, but also especially for Europe. You actually have a degree from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, really well-known German tech institute. And what I love is you're originally from Berlin, my chosen city. So it's really great to have you with us. I would love to kind of kick it off and go back because born in Berlin, how did you get to Karlsruhe and take these first career steps? Because back then, also, machine learning has kind of had an up and down history of being hot and cold in tech, really from Alan Turing on. I mean, we've had waves. So I'd be really curious to know how a young man ends up interested in tech and ends up in Karlsruhe and going off on that branch of tech long before it became a thing.
Yeah. So you could say that I only really know how to do one thing, and like this is what we would call AI today. Yeah, I was born in Berlin, in Kreuzberg, when Berlin was still separated. It was a very different city. I still remember that the air was horrible. There was like smog all the time. I remember hearing in the radio, please keep the windows and doors closed, right?
Wow.
Because like the air quality was so bad. And then when I was still like pretty like little, my parents moved out into Hesse, into like the center of Germany, so to speak. And this is where I had my teenage years. And you can imagine in like the very like rural area there is not a lot of like opportunities to do like a lot of tech and computer science. But I basically found some ways to kind of apply my interest in tech. I joined a ham radio club, so I was one of the youngest members, and I did like Morse code, and I built antennas myself. And when you get your ham radio license, you have to do like tests about like electrical engineering. So you have to know how to draw the electrical diagrams of a transceiver and like all these kind of things. So this got me into like engineering. This got me into like IT. Then I was fortunate that my father had computers at home. My father was working in the IT department of a hospital nearby, so he always had like some computers at home. He also like I was maybe around like 13 when he gave me a book about software engineering. Kind of said, read this. And so I read this, and this was about the programming language MUMS, which is like a little bit of an obscure language, but a quite interesting one. It was a language that had, as part of the language, had its own database, like a NoSQL database part of the language. So pretty cool. And I started coding. My first computer was a Spectrum set, which I'm not sure you remember. It's like a competitor of the Commodore 65.
I was going to say, the Commodore is what everybody really cites.
Exactly. Yeah, and then I started coding with first with BASIC and then Pascal. I focused at school on technical things. I had maths and physics, also engineering, IT. We had a programming offer at school as well. And so basically finishing school, I was thinking about where to go and what to kind of focus on in my academic career. I was considering physics for a while. And then because I was also really interested in economics and things like game theory, I basically decided to do economics engineering in Karlsruhe. There's many great universities that offer this kind of mix of an engineering plus an MBA, like a little bit like that. But I really liked the profile of KIT, then University Karlsruhe, and yeah, so and I moved to Karlsruhe, got my degree there. This degree is like super like long. There's tons of stuff in it. I think the average length of like studies was, I think, 7 years or something like that. So
Wow.
that's quite substantial. Yeah, it's really like almost like an engineering plus an MBA. I wrote thesis about Bayes networks. So this is when I started to get into AI. Of course, I had some like courses that touched on AI topics, and then I really applied it in my thesis, where I was working on Bayes networks. So Bayes networks, you can call them a little bit like the predecessors of deep learning. This was at a time, this was like 2007. This was at a time when deep learning really wasn't as big. So a lot of the AI ML stuff that was applied was other methods like random forest, decision trees, support vector machines. So those were the kind of things people were kind of working at. And so yeah, I started this with my thesis, and then really my whole career was kind of just doing the same things. I was at an investment bank in Zurich, where I built quantitative models for financial instruments. I was a consultant helping like enterprises build models, do the hard math. So, for example, I built developed the formula to price the first inflation-linked bond on a Swiss market.
God.
Uh, these kind of things. And then really my first company was like super small, was optimizing logistics problems. You like today you would also call this AI, but this wasn't even machine learning. This was like simulation, operations research, still pretty ahead of its time, I think. And then with the second company, you mentioned it, Palas Ludens, we got into deep learning, we got into computer vision. This was the ImageNet era. This was when all the self-driving cars, all the computer vision stuff was taking off. And we were super early. We started 2013. We were one of the first companies that really got into that and developed technology that was quite instrumental for a lot of like self-driving car efforts.
You spent a lot of years in an area of tech. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking you founded this company in 2007 at a time when most people were running off doing apps and consumer internet. So you were you had to be really committed to the branch of tech you were going down, because I imagine a lot of people told you, even at KIT, do you really want to do this, Jonas? Is this like the future? Was everybody saying, go, 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 this is great? Or did you find yourself sort of off in an area of tech that didn't feel like it was getting much investment, didn't feel like it was getting enough attention?
Yeah, pretty much. So when I got started, I felt that tech, especially like deep tech AI, is not something that like gets a lot of traction. Like the big things were done different things, and then of course there was we just came out of the .com bubble, and a lot of Germany was just e-commerce. Like when you looked at the tech success stories in Germany, those were pretty much e-commerce stories, and of course there was SAP. By the way, my thesis I wrote with SAP research. So. But of course, other than SAP, there was like no tech success story other than e-commerce. But this was never really something that bothered me. I never chose the path to maximize earnings, and I just loved this kind of technology. And to be honest, I also don't understand B2C at all. Like I've tried it several times, but and I'm looking at what is successful and what isn't and all that. And to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I know it's about like distribution and virality and all that. But what I love about the B2B and B2G market is that usually you're talking to people that are extremely well informed, and they like try hard to make smart decisions. And that's not typically what the consumer does.
Well, tell me about the moment, or was it a slow dawning, or was there a eureka moment when you realized that this corner of the tech world that interests me, but maybe not a lot of others, is actually going to become kind of, the fountainhead for where so much is going now? Because I mean, honestly, you see what's happening in the AI space right now. At what point in your journey, whether it was Palace Ludens or after, or when you got to Apple, and I want to hear about that, like when did you start to say, I'm actually way early on, the technology piece that's going to drive everything?
Yeah, but this was like more of a constant thing where I'm like constantly building like a model for like where the technology is going and what the impact might be, and then like it's always like a little bit faster than I anticipated. There was one eureka moment, so to speak, I had during my time at Apple. So Palas Ludens was building supervised learning technology, meaning that you have like labeled data that basically shows examples of what you want your AI system to learn. So, for example, like bounding boxes around pedestrians, and then you have like all these kind of camera images of pedestrians in the rain and snow with motion blur, all these kind of things, and you collect a lot of like samples, human annotated samples, and this basically sparked the autonomous driving hype. So it's very useful technology, but it has disadvantages, and one of the disadvantages is that it requires all this expensive labeling. All the companies that were building these kind of technologies were spending insane amount of money on labeling, and even if you spend a lot of money and compute and data and all that, your system, your supervised learning system, will never be able to produce anything other than the signal you gave it to them, right? So in this example, the pedestrian detector will never do more than detect 100% of all pedestrians, right? Mm-hmm. So it will never surprise you. It will never inspire you beyond just getting the job done and detecting pedestrians. So this was the supervised learning era, so to speak. And during my time at Apple, there was some work out there that was surprising beyond supervised learning. So there's like two approaches really that go beyond supervised learning. One is what's called self-supervised or unsupervised learning, which kind of means that the AI system is learning the patterns of a complex system, environment, data just by looking at it. So like no human interaction needed. You can, and that's basically what LLMs do, right? They just learn their base capability just by reading text, just by looking at text without human signal needed at all. And then the other field was reinforcement learning. And in both fields, there was some phenomenal successes. I saw results that I myself and some other smart, brilliant people around me, we all thought them to be impossible. We all thought that no AI system could ever achieve these kind of results just by looking at data, just by like self-supervised interactions. So this was a little bit my eureka moment where I said, okay, this technology, now this is coming and this is making things possible that since the dawn of people talking about AI were never possible. Were always the examples of things impossible. So there was this old like saying in NLP, in like natural language processing, that was this example for things AI systems couldn't do and wouldn't do. And the example was like the conversation to a waiter, where a waiter says, the corner table gets a beer, right? And so basically this was the example, something that humans would intuitively understand because we have all this world knowledge and all this context, and we can be playful with language, and the AI systems just couldn't. But of course, from today's perspective, this is easy, right? Even like a small chatbot can understand this, no problem. And this was beginning when I was at Apple. So this sparked this is, by the way, also where the name Aleph Alpha comes from. I'll iterate on that in a minute. But this was kind of my observation, saying that I want to work on this technology. I don't want to spend my time with corporate management. Let somebody else do that can do a better job at it than I, and focus on this technology. And so that's also how I came up with the name Aleph Alpha. There's in math, there's a concept Aleph null, that is the infinite set of the set of infinitely countable numbers. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 till infinity. and there's Aleph Alpha, which is the alpha set of infinitely countable numbers. And I really like this image for generalizable AI systems, where one AI system that's trained on a complex like observations can solve all kinds of problems, not necessarily limited to the ones that it was built for.
Mm. When you had these revelations and this realization at Apple, like I want to go in this direction, at what point did you make the internal decision, I need to get out of this corporate world and found my next company? I mean, or did it begin while you were in Apple, thinking, "Hey, somebody should do this"? Like, get us from being in the mothership, which a lot of people would probably end their career with, because Apple is, I think, widely considered a really amazing and fascinating place to work, and amazing projects there. To go in and then come out is a really interesting trajectory. What brought you out?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When I joined Apple, I could still remember the day I got my Apple badge, and I was standing in front of the Infinite Loop. This was the headquarters back then, and I put my badge to the door, and it went green and opened. And I still remember the first moment I did that, and thinking to myself, "Wow, that's crazy! I'm like part of Apple, and not just part of Apple. I was part of Apple AI R&D in their special projects division. So this is like what is called Q division with James Bond, right? So this is like amazing. And when I started, I felt that, oh, it's perfect, right? I will never leave. I can play around with like future technology. I'm surrounded by brilliant minds, and I'm working for a company I respect. Right? I really like the more privacy concerned focus that Apple has. Of course, they are brilliant at creating products. They can arguably do this better than anybody else. Yeah, and then the challenge was that I got into like management structures, and I was not like super high up, but like reasonably high up in like engineering management, and I just felt that I'm spending all of my time in like management meetings, and um, the focus in most cases is not on innovation. The focus is on corporate management and politics. And don't get me wrong, like politics is necessary. You know, it's necessary to get an organization like Apple and any large organization to move it and to shape it. You need to do politics, and it's also to be expected that, especially maybe on the West Coast, people are not that open with what they think. Right? It's like more of a very friendly, but maybe superficially friendly culture. And I'm a German engineer, so I always have this instinct that if I feel something is like technically wrong, I want to point it out. I want to dig into problems and get to the bottom of things. And this was like a little bit difficult. So culturally, I didn't vibe 100% with the culture. Yeah, and then I don't think my talent is corporate management. I don't think that is where what I enjoy doing. I enjoy creating innovation, and I think compared to like tech companies, I'm a CEO that's maybe like a little bit more on the technical side. I enjoy these kind of things, and so yeah, and then I was in the fortunate position that I was not like desperately needing the Apple paycheck, and so I decided to leave, and I decided to start in Germany again, and again, like this thinking was that I felt that this technology is gonna be very impactful and is gonna create a new industrial revolution, so to speak. And at that time, there was nobody really in Europe that had any clue about that. Yeah.
Was there anybody in Silicon Valley who had a clue about it? Because I mean, one of the things that's been so famous about the last few years is how flat-footed the big players reacted to the rise of AI or the promise of it. I mean, Apple famously had Siri very early on, and yeah, it makes us laugh. It's sort of like Amazon Alexa, both supposed AI assistants, which fell completely by the wayside in terms of product type and capabilities. Did coming back, was it also a consequence of the fact that it didn't feel like Apple was maybe the center of the universe for AI development either? Or was that a Silicon Valley wide blindness going on?
So Apple is like notoriously secretive. So there's like a lot of brilliant people in Apple AI R&D. And by the way, I worked with Siri AI R&D quite a bit at the end of my time at Apple. And so I can certainly say that inside Siri and Apple AI R&D, there are some brilliant people that were very aware of like what's technically possible, what's happening around the world. This was like GPT-2 just launched at that time. And I remember talking to colleagues about GPT-2. So we were very much aware of that. But you're absolutely right in the sense that like Siri like was not anywhere near using that technology. And maybe there's two reasons for that. And one reason is that Apple is very keen on the responsibility it has to its users in terms of like misguiding users, creating false answers, false replies. And so Apple is extremely cautious and wants to prevent at all cost that maybe like a child that's using Siri will get a dangerous response. And when you're familiar with this technology with LLMs, we know that it's very difficult to prevent something like 100% from happening. Right? There's always like ways around safeguards and all that. So I think that's one question, one problem that kind of kept Apple hesitant, maybe justifiably so. And the other point really is that the innovator's dilemma, so to speak. Right? Apple acquired Siri a while ago, and at that time, Siri was state of the art. It was like how you do that, how you build these kind of systems, and then of course the architecture of the solution became in some parts the org structure inside Apple. This is how it's always has always gone, right? So you have people responsible for components and parts, and people very invested, like naturally have their career invested in the technology they build. So in a structure like that, it's very difficult to be fast and adopt something new that's like a paradigm shift that's completely different, because it would require change on an organizational level, and yeah, that's always difficult. So that's not just like something that is with Apple, like that's happening with Apple. That's every large organization, and that's why typically like disruptive innovations can be created faster with startups which then can be acquired by the large tech companies.
Yeah, so it was a great move in many ways then to say, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to found Aleph Alpha. I'm going to come back to Europe. Really one of the first sort of founders repatriating and kind of doing a rallying cry for Europe. What made you think I could build a really great future for myself and for the ecosystem in Europe? Because there was, I think there's a lot more optimism about what's going on here now. But I think at the time you came, it was definitely something that people in Silicon Valley probably asked you a lot. Like, why are you going back? Are you sure? Get us back from Cupertino to Europe. How did that happen mentally?
You're absolutely right. I have a friend that's a very experienced entrepreneur, and when I told him what I was planning to do, he called me crazy and kind of said, "This is all impossible." Because the plan was not only to build a company that is headquartered in Germany, but also to fund it in a sovereign way, like fund it as independent as possible. And back then I was already looking at building a data center, and like those are all things that are difficult to do, and smart people with good reason advised me against that and kind of said this is gonna be impossible, it's gonna cause you so much trouble and so much worries. And one friend said that you cannot fund like a deep tech AI R&D company in Germany. German investors only know how to do e-commerce. That's what he said, right? And yeah, maybe this was the case a while ago. But we are now seeing a new generation of startups where it's not just us. There's a lot of phenomenal deep tech startups that go into like space and fusion and robotics and all that, right? Phenomenal companies. So really, I think we are building a new era of the startup and venture ecosystem also for Europe. And we have like from Aleph Alpha, there was already 4 people or teams leaving, starting their own companies. And so this is how the ecosystem goes. Like our investors learned a lot, our teams learned a lot, the founders learned a lot, and so we are building in like the deep tech ecosystem that, of course, the US has built like 4 generations, but in like Germany, in Europe, it's just getting going.
Why? It was interesting that you said as a criteria, I want to be funded by Europe, because a lot of the tech here is still funded by the US just because the VC firms and other investors are here and relatively present. Why was it important to you? You use the word sovereignty already? Why was it important to financially have your epicenter be here?
So sovereignty for me has different dimensions, and maybe you can sum it up with the ability, the capacity to take responsibility for the future. And so this means that I want to build technology. I want to contribute to like a world where enterprises, governments can shape their own future, can act in a sovereign way. And in order to do that, of course, there's tons of interest in the world, and of course, everyone is like rightfully looking after their own interests. What I wanted to do is I wanted to have shareholders that share my mission, shareholders that basically are whose interests and whose ideas and values are 100% aligned with where I want to go. And so from like a European perspective, the assumption was that if I find European investors, they probably have a stronger focus on a Europe, building a strong Europe, building a Europe where we can shape the future according to our values. And so that's what we did with institutional investors. And I mean, the last funding round where we raised $500 million from like some of the best companies in the world. This is even like a next level of that, because now my customers are also my shareholders. So I have 100% alignment between the interests of my customers and the interests of my board. And if I had in my board, I don't know, like a monopoly whose focus was on trying to create a technology lock-in for these customers, for these enterprises, then this would create a conflict between like my goals and the goals of my shareholders. So I'm super happy that I was able to pull it off that way. And by the way, it's not only European investors. We have Hewlett Packard Enterprise again also as investors, right? So this is not like Europe against the US. This is not like a fight between two parties, but this is about the interests of European companies, the interests of companies around the world that are looking for like a sovereign alternative.
Makes absolute sense. Let's talk a little bit about Aleph Alpha. We've been talking about kind of macro stuff and what got you to do it. I'd love to go back a few years to when you started and the hype began about LLMs, and ChatGPT 2, as you said, had just happened, and here we came. And in the beginning, I think all the hype was just around the models and large language models. You recognized, I think, perhaps earlier than others, that that's not, that's not where all of the business will be, or not where most of the business will be. Get us through this process of your founding thesis of Aleph Alpha and how that changed, if any, and when you realized, okay, actually, it's going to be about the data and the services on top. Because I'd love to hear also, just in your words, where Aleph Alpha now sees its market and its mission, because I think it's evolved a bit, but maybe not as much as others, because I think you realized early on that it wasn't just about the LLM.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning, the founding idea was that generalizable AI is going to change the world. And I focused from the very beginning, I focused on the kind of application areas where they're especially critical and complex. So we started working with government and like law enforcement and defense from the very beginning. and also worked on like critical questions and use cases in the industry. So those, like from the very beginning, we looked at problems that are so complex that like a chatbot is maybe not sufficient in terms of responsibility and transparency, and there's no easy answers, right? So when you work with, for example, like military intelligence, then you have so many diverging information. Maybe you have misinformation, maybe you have like outdated information, right? So you really need AI systems that give you more than just one answer in like a chatbot environment, right? So that's how we got started with that focus, with that hypothesis. And then of course LLMs came, and this was like GPT-3 came out, and GPT-3 was like amazing, and like amazing step in quality and capability from GPT-2. But at that time, there was really only one offer on the market. It was like there was GPT-3. And the licensing terms back then were such that every data you're going to send to GPT-3 is like full commercial ownership handed over to OpenAI. And of course, for our focus, for our customers, like government institutions, health, this was out of the question, right? So it was out of the question to send your data with that contractual setup to like a US company. But nobody knew at that time how to build a model at that level of quality. And so the first thing we said in terms of like sovereignty, we need a sovereign alternative. We need to enable our partners and customers to run an LLM and specialize this in their own secure environments. And at that time, also the GPT-3 was pretty bad with European languages, right? So this was kind of our two observations. So we set out to build an alternative, and we built a LLM architecture from the ground up. This was the Luminous generation of models we published basically next to GPT-3, and they ranked pretty good against GPT-3. So it was a pretty competitive alternative to GPT-3. But then you're absolutely right. We anticipated very early that there will be a lot of models, and there will be open source models, and there will be many offers of model on the market. So after doing like the Luminous model, we started solving some problems. We had a Luminous based chat agent that was using RAG, which at that time didn't exist as a term, in production with a customer before there was even ChatGPT. So it was very early in like putting this technology into production and test driving and learning about this technology. And then, with the investment, with our A round, we had a plan in place that didn't really change that much since then. So we already knew we have to focus on innovation, differentiating innovation, and we have to focus on enabling the sovereignty on our customers' partners' side. And the bottleneck or the thing they needed wasn't just another LLM. It wasn't like there was Llama, there was other great open source models. So what was really missing for our customers were tools to build and orchestrate, to shape human-machine collaboration, and to make this technology like trustworthy, transparent, fine-tune it, specialize that. So this is what we focused on very early, and this is also what we focused our innovation on.
And yeah, most of the use cases are customers in government or business who have a giant amount of either their own data or their own knowledge base, I guess you'd say. And you guys are mainly coming in with a suite of products and services to help harness that in a proprietary, safe technological space. So it's usually maybe intra or in-house. Give me an idea of some of the things that you've been seeing that you have been able to do for and with your customers lately, because I think you have been really a pioneer in helping the enterprise make the most out of the capabilities of AI.
Yeah, this was certainly the focus from the very beginning. So let me kind of give you some examples. What we now build is called Faria, which is like an operating system for a sovereign AI transformation. So it includes components for being smart about how to interact with humans. So how can I capture and persist the knowledge, the experience that my human experts have in AI systems in a way that I own it myself, right? So we don't want to kind of get our customers' data and then use that to train a model. We empower our customers and partners to do it themselves and retain full control over their knowledge, over their data, right? Because when you look at Europe and where our prosperity is coming from, where our position is coming from, this is almost exclusively knowledge work. Like it's not about like selling resources or something like that, right? Or like running platforms. We like Europe is in the business of its brilliant minds, its innovation, its research, its manufacturing, and all that is of course expressed in documents, but also in the heads of the experts that we have. And so it's absolutely like critical, paramount that we make sure that we empower these companies to use that, to leverage that, and build empires with that, and expand into new markets. So when you think about the Bosch is one of our investors. So when you think about all the knowledge and an organization like Bosch has, all the experience, all the brilliant ideas inside this company, of course, this can be leveraged through AI in like a completely new way. But we also need to make sure that the next version of the like general purpose chatbot that some tech giant is rolling out does not know how to do this, right? If the next version of like ChatGPT or Gemini knows everything that Bosch knows, then why should there be any like value left for Bosch? Why should it? Right. So that's the in the head of many of our customers. How can I protect my data? How can I protect my knowledge and make sure that because this is the foundation of my future positioning. But at the same time, I need to leverage AI. I need to bring everything I'm doing into a new era of knowledge work. So that's what we build technology for, and that's also our customers, and this is our kind of solutions. A few weeks ago, we showed at Hannover Messe how we're using our technology for industrial engineering, the things like requirements engineering, test development. We already signed some customers for that. It's going well, but of course, the speed in the market is kind of insane.
Yeah, I mean, we're now into I guess, the agentic era hype. It's really hard to know what's happening in 6 months from now. So I don't dare ask you where we're going in 5 or 10 years. But what do you see as kind of the trend shaping where we're heading now?
If you haven't seen it, I recommend, like, there's a 40-year-old ad from Apple where they introduce something like an assistant system that kind of looks up things, generates charts, plans your day. And so this was super visionary, right? When you look at the video now, but now we know how to do it. But even like a few years ago, this was impossible. This idea was always around, similar to the idea of like natural language interaction. Like since Eliza, there has been like chatbots that worked well to some extent. I'm not sure if you remember Smarter Child. Does this ring a bell?
The name rings a bell, but tell the
It's
listeners,
like
yeah.
it was also like a chat. It was from the .com era, from the internet hype era on, I think, AOL. I encourage everyone to look it up and look up examples of Smarter Child. Amazing back then, but it was never good enough for it to really take off. And now it is, and it's basically taking the world by storm. But it's also, in terms of value, it's a questionable deal. I just a few days ago saw a study where they looked at 7,000 like examples of general chatbots being applied in the enterprise, and they found the actual value that's being created for the enterprise is almost nothing. Like it's like a few single-digit percentage points, and that's interesting. But it's also anecdotally what I heard in a lot of conversations. I spoke to a lot of like CEOs and leadership of large enterprises, and they tell me that that just the price tag to get a chatbot on every desk for every employee is insane. and it's not clear how you get the value back. Certainly it's like extremely useful, but is this automatically translating into value for the company? And many CEOs, many heads of AI are not sure about that. So what we're seeing, and you're absolutely right, is like agentic systems, and what we're now calling agentic, we maybe used to call software. So it's basically just technology that connects events and data and does some operation. And then of course it's software that uses the potential of LLMs in general. And of course, that's the new thing. So we now have a new module, a new like function that we can use that can do things that we were never able to do in the past. And so we're seeing this applied. So for example, we've applied this for compliance problems, and we've shown that we are reducing the time lawyers need by 70%. And so when you think about that, like just comparing the value proposition, I'll give you a chatbot that's like a general purpose chatbot you can use to write a poem for your mother's birthday, or like a rejection email draft, or you can reduce the time your legal team needs for compliance checks by 70%.
Give me one final thought about the future, because everybody still likes to debate artificial general intelligence, i.e., when are we there, and how do we define it? Do you have a definition? And do you even care? Is this sort of a kind of an academic debate, or does it matter to you that we are approaching what many would say is, we're going to be getting to a point where truly, we're way past a Turing test, and in general, it feels like, we've created a general intelligence that is far beyond what humans could muster.
Yeah, that's a great question. In the AI community, I see the term AGI being used less and less. So when the hype got like started, a lot of people were using the term, myself included, because we felt that this is clearly where we're heading. And I would still agree it is. I would still agree that this will, like, we will continue to see smarter and smarter systems, and I'm sure within our lifetime we will see superhuman AI systems that are superior to almost all humans for almost all tasks. And you can then argue about the 0.1%, or you could argue about whether those systems truly understand what they're saying. And there's some evidence that they don't. There's some evidence that they're pattern learning machines, and so they're very good at recognizing and reproducing patterns in language. And this is super useful, but it is something different from understanding. It seems like AI systems are really limited to the distribution they are trained with, so they don't generalize out a distribution. But it almost makes no difference, at least for the first wave of this industrial revolution, because the overwhelming majority of knowledge work does not require reasoning. It can be solved by being smart about adapting patterns from the past, from your training data, from the knowledge that has been collected as humanity. So I think there's like two answers. One is that for the near term, it doesn't matter. It's not AGI, nowhere near. But in terms of the economic impact, and that will change the world, this is already in progress. This is happening. In terms of like AGI, or like thinking machines and consciousness and these concepts, I'm sure we'll see progress in that direction as well. But I would assume that just scaling LLMs alone will not be sufficient.
It's really helpful. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, because you wear a lot of hats, not just the CEO of Aleph Alpha. As I mentioned earlier, you're also the chair of the Innovate Europe Foundation, and you've been very outspoken also publicly about the need for European tech sovereignty, and the fact that Europe have strength in this industry and in this ecosystem. How do you define European tech sovereignty, and why is it important in your mind?
So there's two sides of the value coin. One is value creation. In order to do that, you need innovation. You need to do things differently, in a better way, come up with new ideas. This is where Europe has always been great. And on the other side of the coin, there is value capture. In order to do that, you need to excel in like commercialization, distribution, and sovereignty. Let me give you one example. If I am producing a new kind of cookie, and I have like this ingenious idea for a new cookie recipe and it's flying off the shelves, people love that cookie, I can charge almost any amount of money for that cookie. But in order to create that cookie, I need a certain kind of nut, and that nut is only provided by one company somewhere in the world, right? So what this company will do is they will put the price point for the nuts so high that they capture all the value I'm creating. Right? So I'm creating the value or my new innovative cookie recipe, but I cannot capture any of that value. And so from like a European perspective, I think it's absolutely crucial that we put all the creativity, all the knowledge, all the value we have in our teams and our data, we are able to use that to build empires, to capture value, because that's for our prosperity. It's absolutely crucial. And in AI, it's like there's an additional dimension, because AI is not just about like industry and about like economics. It's also about liberal democracy, right? Because whoever is building the AI systems is deciding what the right answer is for a controversial question. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing this, like the US is kind of changing or shaping the models according to their ideology and their interests. And of course, China is doing the same, and others are doing the same. But I think in this pivotal point in tech history, not only are we talking about the foundational tech for everything Europe is doing, because it's almost all knowledge work, we're also talking about our values, our culture, and our ability to create and protect our liberal democracy, protect our culture, protect the world we've built for ourselves. So I think for this, in this point in time, it's absolutely crucial that we do not fall into dependency, powerlessness. Right? If a core step of like a process in German government, for example, is built on top of an AI black box that is exclusively in somebody else's cloud, then we have 100% login. We can never move out, and they can charge us any amount of price. And this is what we need to prevent. Of course, this is not about living without any external dependencies. This is not about mercantilism. This is about being strong and being capable and being knowledgeable and take responsibility.
That makes total sense. Just a few weeks ago, Europe had a bit of a wake-up call, as you know, from the International Criminal Court, essentially being locked out of its Microsoft accounts. So we're seeing that already. I think that's why a lot of governments across Europe are awake to that aspect. In comes the irony of the fact that China gave us, with DeepSeek, the paradigm of open source, actually cracking a market wide open that we thought was already going to be completely in US hands. So Europe is sitting here debating endlessly now in Brussels and all the other capitals. Okay, what do we do? Do we build AI factories? Do we just go buy hardware? Do we just support research? Should we put all our poker chips on open source because China has sort of done a all for one for all process here to open the market? Where do you stand? What do you think the approach should be for Europe in the marketplace right now? Because both, the US and China are both being really sort of brutally mercantilist, and Europe is still playing by fair trade, free trade, the last man standing who believes in a fair, open trade system. what should Europe do to get its game face on to be able to stay sovereign in the tech sphere?
I like the phrasing, get our game face on. Um, and of course, DeepSeek was in like communication, marketing, absolute genius. Right? It's a great model, and it's really well built. Of course, the claims around the cost were somewhat misleading, but nevertheless, it was a phenomenal success of like China AI. There's other great models coming from China, by the way, too. Right, Gwen is also like a really great model. So yes, China is really capable. And by the way, this is not surprising. I remember when I got started with Aleph Alpha, I already spoke to politicians about the artificial intelligence development plan, 150 billion, I think. This was basically created by China, coming out of the shock of AlphaGo, where AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol. So China has focused on this for a long time, and in a way that only China can do by combining or aligning industry, academia, and politics, focused on winning in AI. Building models also for China is not a business model. Right? So they're doing this to show what they're capable of. They're building this because they're kind of the attacker, so they can attack the US. But there are also US companies that are building great open source technology. Like Meta with the Llama series of models has also contributed significantly to open source. And to your question, where should Europe stand? What we need is value creation and value capture. So we need because this will create a flywheel. We can do all the government funded projects, we can do all the initiatives. It will all be money that eventually burns up and then will be gone if we don't manage to create the flywheel of value creation, of innovation, of economic activity. So that should be our focus. And if it helps us to build a cool open source model, of course, yeah, go for it, right? But this is, and if it helps us to build like a data center, again, this is not a bad thing, but it's not the bottleneck. It's not what's holding us back. What's holding us back is creating successful business models. This could be startups like ourselves, but the startups will not have the majority of the value created through OpenAI. The majority of the value needs to be with Bosch, with Schwarz Group, with Deutsche Bank, with our investors. Like they need to benefit to the tunes of billions, because this is the potential they have in their markets with their data, with their experts. And then I'm hoping that we can contribute technology that enables them into a strong position. And then, of course, also I'm hoping we're earning a little bit of money ourselves. But that's what we should be focusing on. And I'm a little bit worried that sometimes there's too much distraction around building data centers or doing like open source models, right? So this is like every week there's a great open source model, and of course we can build another one, and we've done, right? Germany with Teuken has built a great open source model, but this is not gonna have a long-term economic impact on the German industry by itself.
Makes total sense. I'd like to shift gears a little and talk to Jonas, the founder, because you've been on quite a journey and you founded multiple companies, as we said. But I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons as the founder of Aleph Alpha that you might not have acquired with your previous attempts or successful at running and starting a company. What are some of the biggest things that you think you've learned over these last few years of running Aleph Alpha? Because it's been quite a roller coaster ride for those who aren't familiar with at least the German market. You have, I dare say, in the last couple of years, become something of one of the poster children for the AI age in Germany. So it's been quite a ride, I dare say, and I imagine you've picked up a lot of personal learnings as a founder and a CEO.
Absolutely. And the situation we find ourselves in today is very different from the situation with my last startup. In the last startup, we were very early, we had our niche, we were successful, we were cash flow positive after like 2.5 years. Now with Aleph Alpha, we are not only competing against like the largest organizations in the world, we are also in the center of geopolitical tension, political interest, the interest of the general audience, the general public. And I'm always trying to kind of think about how to balance all these opportunities and needs. And it's phenomenal to be invited to like German government, to meeting heads of state. It's great to join the TTC talks as a representative of Europe and sit next to Anthony Blinken. That's awesome, right? And getting to know all these brilliant people. But it's also costing us a lot of resources. It's costing me a lot of resources. Like every day, I'm talking to somebody about the AI Act, or I'm trying to kind of explain technology or help Europe out, is a day that I cannot spend on improving our product or talking to our customers. So the interesting thing is that while some of the large companies are, of course, well equipped to do lobbying, to contribute to the legal processes and help create these norms and standards and all that, at Aleph Alpha, as a company that like not even 400 people now, right? We're like somewhat north of 300, is still small compared to all the other actors. It's interesting to make the right judgment call on kind of what to do. Without our communication, without the work that we're doing with Europe, with Brussels, with the press, we may not have been able to raise that round of funding, right? We get a lot of inbound, we get a lot of phenomenal people that apply for a job with us, and basically without us having to spend a lot of money on like searching and proactively approaching these people. So that's phenomenal, and I'm always happy to interview people that basically tell me how they got to know about our mission, about our work. We've recently been able to, together with AMD, to talk about our tokenizer-free architecture, where we basically invented the next generation of like deep learning architecture for LLMs that has huge advantages for outer distribution knowledge and fine-tuning and languages. But that's one of the challenges, and I think we're learning how to take this responsibility and be a actor that's helpful, while at the same time the highest priority is our teams, is our product, is our customers.
That's great. I'm thinking you mentioned earlier how you were the blunt German engineer in Cupertino in those teams. You've obviously recognized certain leadership skills that you need now to run a company. I mean, 300, 400 people is bigger than most. What are some of the skills that you see that you've developed or that a founder in your position needs? Because so many of Europe's future founders are actually people like yourself who were maybe the engineer or the researcher or the product person. I used to run a leadership school, and I know that this is really one of the big kind of gaps we have to close, is that Europe has really incredible specialists and technical people who might not have been taught leadership or business. You've studied business, but talk about what you've discovered that it really takes in terms of some of the traits or skills that you've had to really sharpen to be able to lead a team and a company.
So there's maybe two pieces of advice here. One is that you should never blindly following trends. This is dangerous. And because we didn't do that, we were able to create a pretty healthy equity story, right? So if we would have wasted hundreds of millions on what one investor called the fastest depreciating asset in tech history, then our equity story would be in a pretty deep hole. Right? Because like, once you spend that money and you spend it on something that does not create lasting value, then yeah, it's very difficult for the company to kind of create a positive return for the team and for everyone involved. So this is my advice, is just because your investors or the press, or just because people are kind of yelling at you because why aren't you doing that, right? Why in our example, why hasn't Aleph Alpha also built like a chat GPT clone, or also build a general purpose LLM that can write a poem for my mother's birthday? Where's the version of Aleph Alpha? And this took us some explaining, but I'm very happy that we made this choice, because we saved a lot of money for something that would not have created a lot of value. So I think that's one answer. And then the other piece of advice is that you have to quickly figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then find brilliant people that complement your gaps or the things that you don't really enjoy doing. And so basically, this is something that I maybe should have done even faster. Maybe that's the first step, right? I have a phenomenal co-founder, but maybe the first step, before we even, like, in the first year, we wrote a lot of like papers and did a lot of code. I did a lot of coding myself in like the first years. But maybe the first thing every founder should be doing is finding brilliant people that complement the team, because this is like a phenomenal foundation. Once you have a core team that basically covers all the bases, then you're set up to scale.
What are you best at and what are you worst at?
So I think I am bad at busy work that I feel is not like difficult or inspiring. So basically, just boring, tedious, repetitive work. This is not really what I'm good at. And so there's people that love these kind of things, like they love to fine-tune processes, they love to kind of polish things. What I'm good at is innovation. I've always had an intuition for looking at technology and then forming an opinion how this technology can be applied to do something that will change the world. And this is not just for AI or deep learning. I've basically been doing the same thing in all of my roles, in all of my positions. And this is also what I enjoy doing. And even to this very day, I think more than most CEOs involved in our technology and in our AI approaches, how we're building things, how we're innovating in the trenches, very low level, drawing designs myself and things like that. But of course, scaling a company and aligning a company that has like 300, 400 people requires a lot more than just innovation or vision or strategy. But I'm happy that I found a great executive team that complements me there.
That's great. This has been really a fun conversation. I could probably go another hour, but I think we should probably wrap it up soon. I've got a few kind of rapid fire questions, and you don't need to make really long answers, but it'd just be fun also to hear some of the replies. And the first one, I think, is always really fascinating to talk to people in the tech world. If you had to start over in a non-tech sector right now, where do you think you'd be pursuing a career?
If it was about fun, art, I always enjoyed creating music and playing in the theater and stuff like that. So art would be the fun project, and the responsibility project would be care, elderly care, and I think this is where a lot of innovation is needed.
That's really fascinating. What is something that you really love about Germany and Europe? I mean, you moved back from California, so it wasn't just about business. What is it that you love?
I love the sincerity, and I love the depth, the cultural depth that we have in Germany. I feel there's a large, like there are many people that have a cultural perspective, and that is pretty deep and pretty like grounded in a lot of ideas. And so you can relatively easily have like a complex conversation about abstract ideas. This is really what I like. Of course, Silicon Valley is like a little bit of a bubble, right? It's like very different than some other regions in the US. But this is what I like about Europe. And then I like about Europe that there is this shared like foundation of values. sometimes we overdo it when we basically put this in front of everything. Like we first want to make everything super ethical and like overthink this to like an insane amount before we even get going. But the good thing about it is that there is these shared values. There's this kind of shared philosophy and maybe ideology or like these principles of acting, and we really care about. And when it's not misguided, this can actually create a lot of good.
Makes sense. Here's a tough one. Berlin or Heidelberg?
So now for me, Heidelberg, but I love Berlin. I think Berlin is a phenomenal city to have a party, and the what has developed in Berlin over the last years and decades is absolutely mind blowing. So I think both is phenomenal and it's great. So the best solution is to have a company that has a large office in Heidelberg and Berlin, and so you can drive back and forth.
That's a Solomonic answer there. So here's a tougher one. Early bird or night owl? Maybe not so tough.
So of course, Early Bird, one of our biggest investors, and who has helped us. No, I mean, I'm actually not only a fan of the VC firm Early Bird, but also myself. I love to work in the early morning. I love to do like sports in the early morning. But as a founder, you're kind of both, right? So you're an early bird and you're a night owl. It's kind of how these things goes.
Yeah, that I totally agree with you there. Who is somebody you've seen a lot of people, and you've also worked in Silicon Valley, and maybe you even saw Steve Jobs before he passed away. Who's somebody in the tech world that you admire, and why?
I unfortunately was never able to work with Steve. Everything I've heard from him is he's seems absolutely amazing. There's a lot of great people. I've met Tony Fadell. I think when it is about the idea around product and this kind of mindset is brilliant. He's like a brilliant thinker. In Paris, I spoke to Lisa Su. I think she's one of the best tech leadership we currently have on the planet. A brilliant mindset. I also love scientific thinkers. So Richard Feynman, combining the analytical brilliance with the savoir vivre, so like how to spend a good life. There's many great people, and of course many great people in the US, but also phenomenal people in Europe. I'm now in the fortunate position that I get to meet and have conversations with some of the political and industry leaders in Germany and in Europe. And I came out of many of those conversations absolutely inspired and blown away by the quality of leadership we have. And unfortunately, we build a system that's so complex and convoluted that even brilliant leaders sometimes struggle to make the right moves.
I see that so much. You said you've been having a lot of amazing conversations with leaders and others. I'm sure everybody likes to give you advice now. So, what over the course doesn't have to be the last years? Maybe it was from your childhood. What for you is really one of the key pieces of advice that you live by that you ever received?
So I tell you, one of the best leadership CEO advices I ever gotten. This was from like Nigel, the CEO of GraphCore. I was having dinner with him, and he leaned in and looked at me and said, "Jonas, it is the job of the CEO to do absolutely nothing." So I think that's great advice, right? I haven't been able to implement it fully yet. But I agree in the sense that you should, especially as a CEO, you should try to empower the organization so that it doesn't need you, right? Because there will always be new things, there will always be new opportunities that you could work on. And so basically building an organization and hiring a team that is very capable of running the ship by themselves, I think is a high priority. It should be a high priority for every CEO.
That's brilliant. That's a great philosophy to live by.
And interesting, and that's maybe like there's an interesting dimension here, and this is maybe also why I was not very successful as a like corporate manager, because as a founder, if you live by that principle, you're golden, right? You are the founder, right? And if you build a phenomenal team and that team is like visible and successful, this is your success, and nobody questions that. But if you are a corporate manager and you have a very successful team, then maybe members of that team or peers will try to attack you and kind of say, why isn't that guy doing anything, right? So everything is coming from the team. So you kind of have to play the corporate politics. You kind of have to also do some marketing for yourself and your own contribution. You cannot just empower the team. So I think that's maybe where my natural tendency is more suited towards being a founder than a corporate manager.
That makes total sense. Next to last question, one that would fascinate me because I'm perhaps near your generation too. What's a piece of tech that you miss from the 1990s or 2000s?
The flip phones. I love flip phones. I still have like an old StarTech, basically in my personal like tech museum, and I think just the gesture of opening a phone to accept the call and then in a very theatrical fashion closing a call by closing your that's brilliant.
This has been really a lot of fun talking, and I only have one question left. But Jonas, thanks so much for your time. And so I'd love to end on a bit of a positive note. Tell me something that makes you optimistic about the future of Europe.
So I really believe in the incredible potential we have on a human level, on like a cultural level, and also on an entrepreneurial level. The companies that I'm fortunate to call my investors, my shareholders, like Schwarz Group, Bosch, SAP, Deutsche Bank, Christian Company, Burda, they are full of knowledge and brilliant people and opportunity. And in maybe the last decade, we struggled to apply all this potential. And I think one of the states that Germany needs as a catalyst maybe is this kind of backs against the wall. So a good example was when we had the energy crisis during the Ukraine war. The speed in which we create these LNG terminals was insane, right? This was crazy good. So when you speak to other people about German like, infrastructure investments and the kind of Deutsche Bahn, the train network and all that, everything takes forever and everything is delayed and all that. But if we have our backs against the wall, then we can do brilliant things. And so what I'm sure will happen now is that due to everything coming together, the speed of the AI's change, the geopolitical tension, the war that's basically on Europe's doorstep, this will create the sentiment, or is already creating the sentiment that, okay, enough lollygagging, we have to get to work now. And I think this will create a lot of, like, free up so much energy. And I think this will create a new era of Europe.
Well, on that really positive note, thanks so much, Jonas Andrulis, for joining us today, and best of luck. And I want to live in that new era you're creating.
Thanks. That was fun.
Thanks, Jonas.